Okay, hello and welcome to another action figure unboxing. I just got this from Amazon today, and it's Masters of the Universe Origins Mer-Man, Ocean Warlord. So I've been really excited for this one because, as you may recall, Mer-Man is actually one of my favorite characters in the vintage line. And I actually have with me my vintage Mer-Man so we can compare and contrast the two different versions. So this should be fun. Alright, so got a nice piece of artwork on the back with Mer-Man swimming along with an octopus and a jellyfish, and he's glancing up at the surface, and you can see at the surface of the water, He-Man is engaged in a battle with Skeletor. It's both the battle armor versions, and Skeletor is riding on Spydor, so hopefully this is a hint that they're gonna be making Spydor for this line. I think that would be really cool. And it's got the cross-cell artwork of all the characters from this wave, as well as He-Man and Skeletor. And Zodak hopefully won't be much longer coming to me, because I ordered the Zodak. Should probably go ahead and order Roboto, too, if I can find one of him for a decent price on Amazon. And it's got where you can, illustrated where you can put his weapon in his hand, and, you know, the powerful battle positions. So fit sort of into his hand, and twist into powerful battle positions. This sort of Rakash bit, that must be like something that came from like 2000X or later. Like it might have been something they came up with for the Classics line, because they like to name stuff. But we didn't have a name for it when I was a kid. It was just his corn sword, because it looks kind of like corn. Let's go ahead and open them up. Yeah, in actuality, the sword is not supposed to be corn. It's supposed to be like a bone from a sawfish. Damn, that's in there really good. It's actually taped onto his back, and you can see that I was one of the lucky ones who actually got the corn sword, whereas some people have been reporting that they've accidentally been getting the Princess of Power sword instead. Like She-Ra would come with this sort of Rakash here, and Mer-Man would wind up coming with the Sword of Protection, because they're both yellow swords, and people would get confused. Why am I cutting through the tape when I can just cut through the top of the bag? And that will be way easier. So let's get a sword out. And to me, this looks a little smaller than the vintage sword, but we'll compare that in a minute. Then we got the comic book here, which I believe is the same comic book that came with She-Ra. And he's got a little instruction booklet that comes with him, so we'll have a look at that in a second. Put my exacto knife down. Yeah, I believe this is the same comic that came with She-Ra. They usually, every assortment has its own comic book, as opposed to the old days when every figure had their own comic book, which obviously I preferred. Now let's go ahead and cut the damnable rubber bands, the bane of my existence. Go ahead and get those loose. Man, if I was a kid and not an adult with razor-sharp implements, those would really get on my nerves. Alright, so we got the little tray out. I'm going to go ahead and put that together so I can throw that out later. And I'll hold on to the card back, because I like the artwork on them. Okay, so there is Mer-Man. Let's get the rubber bands off of him. And he looks pretty cool. What I'm used to in these figures is that they base the head off of the original head, but you can see that it's slightly different. Like, I think they made his eyes a little smaller, and the opening of his mouth is like not quite as open. Like, there's like a little less space there. And I think they tweaked his I don't know what you call that, the orange space on his face around his eyes. It makes him look a little more fearsome, so that's interesting. Also, another difference that I notice is that the armor is not the same mold as the original armor. Like, for one thing, you see the belt buckle is a separate piece on the original one, whereas on the newer one, it's all one solid piece. And if you look at how the strap connects at the sides, completely different. This strap seems to go a little more straight across the lower part of his chest, whereas this one loops underneath his rib cage. And you can see how it connects is a little different, because this one connects a little more sharply, and this one connects like, it kind of widens out there. It also looks to me like this strap is a little more rounded than the one on the original figure. And if you look, you can see that he's got a little more spikes on the fins at the shoulders. Probably because these are a little too narrow, and this makes it look a little more fleshed out. And he's got the typical articulation of Masters of the Universe Origins figures at this point. If you've got Skeletor, you pretty much already know how this guy moves. I've noticed in a lot of these, like, the main part where he gets stiff is, like, right here at the elbow. Like, the knees usually move pretty well right out of the package, but the elbows can be a little stiff. So I like to, before I try to move them, I don't want to break them or anything, I usually hit them with a hairdryer first and kind of cool it, kind of soften it up a little bit, so that way I can more easily move those elbows. I'm going to tighten up his armor a little bit. It seems like it fits a little loosely onto him. And it's also a much more rubbery material than the original one, which is, again, kind of expected of the Origins figures. Let's see how his sword fits in his hand. It fits pretty well. I do think the handle's still a little wide, like the older one was, but you can always kind of wrap it around so the hand guard is on the other side, and that'll help hold it in. Or you can do what I do with my vintage Mer-Man and just kind of put it onto the open claw hand. The Mer-Man can be a southpaw, that's fine. Why not? But it doesn't seem like it fits on there as well as the original one. But you can get it to go on there. You just gotta have a little bit of effort. So there we go. And he's holding his sword of Rakash. His sword of the Niblet. Likewise with my vintage Mer-Man, that's where I like to have him hold the sword because the handle's so thick. And if I compare the two of them, I'm noticing that they actually are, like, if you're just looking at the bone sculpting of it, that seems to be about the same size. So it's actually technically not smaller. But what is smaller is the kind of plastic flash that goes around that. I don't know if you can really see the detail of that very well, because I think the computer monitor is kind of washing it out. But it's got that little bit of plastic flashing on there, so it's not like actually a sharp, spiky toy. Because the original one was made in the 80s, so. But that isn't quite as thick or as rounded as the original one. You can see it's a little more pointy at the top, whereas the original one is more rounded, and like even the edge of it is a little more rounded. So it's like they tried to make this into an actual blade, whereas I don't think it was supposed to be like a blade at all on the original toy. I think it's just the bone portion of it is supposed to be real, and the part around it is just kind of like for safety reasons or to make sure it comes out of the mold correctly or whatever, but you're supposed to pretend like that's not there. Whereas with this one, I think you are supposed to pretend like it's there. It actually is a blade, and the sawbone is just kind of like a detailing that's sculpted into it. I could be wrong about that. I'm not 100% sure what the motivation was, but for the most part, I'm really happy with this guy. He's a nice update on the vintage figure. Let's compare him a little bit more, and you can see that the colors are quite a bit brighter on this one, which again is typical for the Origins figures. Is they tended to brighten the figures up a little bit, and Masters of the Universe was already a pretty bright and colorful line, so this just kind of like cranks it up to 11. But I think Mer-Man looks really cool. Let's see if his sword will fit in his back pretty well. Yeah, it popped it right open. But I'm betting if I loosen it back up at the shoulders, that'll probably not be as big of a deal. Or if I just make sure I hold it closed with my thumb as I put the sword in there, then it stays over there pretty well. So, Mer-Man, highly recommend. He's what I consider one of the essential characters of the Masters of the Universe line. He's one of the first wave, the first assortment of figures. So I mean, like you can get into the semantics of like what's the first wave with that, but you know he's one I consider one of the original like what 8 figures. We think He-Man, Skeletor, Beastman, Merman, Man at Arms, Tila, Zodak, Stratos. Yeah, that's 8 figures. So yeah, he's an important one. He might not be as flashy as say Trapjaw or somebody like that. He might not have as many of the gimmicks, but he's still a really cool figure and worth having. So I love my Merman. So it's like, how can I not? It's basically like you take creature from the Black Lagoon and drop them in the middle of like a sword and sorcery thing. That's pretty cool. So anyway, that's pretty much it for this time, and we'll